get you nice and introduced. It's so great to have you joining us. Oh my gosh, Amy, this has been an incredible 3 days, broadcasting all over the world, people joining us from all over the world, little hiccups with technology trying to stop us, but we're just soldiering through, and it's just been an absolute blast bringing biodiversity into everybody's living rooms.
You are a beast, Joe. I'm amazed by everything that you do, and this has been incredible to watch and also now to be a part of. So thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
All
And,
right. Let's get you good and introduced and then let you take over for a little bit, because what you do is incredible. The way you tell stories, the way you bring the stories back to people is amazing. So we've got Ami Vitale joining us right now, Nikon ambassador, National Geographic photographer, traveled to more than 100 countries. She's bared witness to violence and conflict, but also the surreal beauty and enduring power of the human spirit. Right now, she's kind of turned her attention to some of today's most compelling wildlife and environmental stories. And I just have to share this as well, because this is just pretty darn cool. Amy was named one of 50 of the most badass women on the planet by Instyle Magazine. I think that is so cool, because she shows up, she speaks up, and she gets things done. Amy, thank you for turning up and showing up at the Global Biodiversity Festival.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to start today with what Paul ended with, which was a really profound statement. We don't all have to be scientists. We all have a voice, and we can find there is a role for each and every one of us. And that is my big takeaway message. That's what Paul left us with. And I think that's, a profound thing to realize for everybody that, is tuning in, that we have to prioritize our planet and the natural world. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a scientist or even I took the path as a storyteller, but there's so many roles for all of us. Yeah. And then should I just jump right in? I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. And then hit play, and let me hit play, and here we go. Do you have my screen there?
Looks good. Nice and full screen.
All right, great. So that is the big takeaway. If you leave right now, it's all about having hope. Hope matters. Hope and our ingenuity is going to get us through. And I just want to start with how I got involved in conservation. And it began a little over 10 years ago when I met one of actually 4 of the last northern white rhinos on the planet were being moved from this zoo right here in the Czech Republic, Dvůr Králové Zoo, to Africa, to Kenya, in this last-ditch effort to save the whole species. Because if you can imagine, at the time, there were only 8 of them alive, just 8, and they were all in zoos. And something about meeting this prehistoric looking creature, you look at it and you can instantly recognize that this animal as a species has been roaming the planet for millions of years, but it couldn't survive us, mankind. And something about seeing this gentle, hulking, ancient species stopped me in my tracks. I knew at that moment I had to just pivot quickly and refocus the stories that I was interested in on our connection to wildlife, because I understood at that moment that, watching this species die is actually watching ourselves die, that we need each other. We're in this ecosystem. And so on that day, it was a snowy day. They took them, put them in these crates, and flew them back to Kenya. And this is how we imagine wildlife roaming the open plains of Africa, but this is what it actually looks like today. These creatures are being poached to extinction. We're witnessing it on our watch. Poaching is not slowing down, and it's not just rhinos. It's a whole host of other species. I'm sorry, this is really graphic. This is an elephant, but we are witnessing lots of species going extinct. Poaching is one of the reasons. Habitat loss is probably the biggest problem. And I started to investigate. I wanted to understand right away, what could I do to understand and tell this story, and what are the solutions? And everything I read about at that time, 10 years ago, was really focusing on militarizing. How do we stop the poachers in the case of rhinos and elephants and a whole host of other species? But I started to investigate and I realized that the biggest piece of the story was always being left out. That is the indigenous community. What do they think about all of this? They are the ones living with these magnificent creatures, right? And so I started investigating and found beautiful stories of hope. This is Yusuf. He's a wonderful friend. I just saw him 2 days ago, and on virtually, but he is so committed, commits his life to protecting these animals. This is a baby black rhino, three of them, but they are a different species than the northern white, and they had been orphaned. And he literally sleeps with these babies, protects them, has committed his life to protecting them. And I began to find all these amazing stories. This is at Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, and these are a group of Samburu young men seeing black rhinos for the first time in their lives. They had never even seen, some of them hadn't even seen a photo of them. Despite it being the best habitat for them, they had been poached to local extinction in many places in Kenya. And they had a dream. Their dream was to bring rhinos that had been extinct for 25 or 30 years back to this landscape. And this is the moment they're all touching an orphaned baby black rhino, and they had such reverence and really, they were so excited actually in this moment to lay their hands on these creatures, and they their dream came true. They were actually able to bring 11 of them, and they created a brand new conservancy called Sarah Conservancy, which is healthy and thriving. And I believe already 6 babies have been born. This is Kamara and Khalifi, another orphan rhino that Kamara spends his life protecting. So I chose to focus my energy on the real heroes, who are the indigenous people out there protecting, committing, sacrificing their lives to protect these creatures. Now I want to flash back to the northern white rhinos. Today, there's only 2 of them left. All of them have passed away. Their plan to try to get them, they thought that the open plains of Kenya would stimulate them and that they might breed and have babies, but it didn't work. And today there's only 2. And in March of 2018, I got the call from Old Pedja to hurry back, that Sudan, the last male northern white rhino, was about to pass away. And I got there and photographed this heart-wrenching moment of Jojo, one of the keepers, saying goodbye, giving his final goodbye to Sudan. And something about this moment just, it broke my heart. And I think it resonates with people because it's very symbolic. On the one hand, we can be the best protectors of all wildlife and all these species. And at the same time, we are the greatest destroyer. And I think that this picture illustrates that, the beauty and the hope, and also the sublime moment here that, it's sort of like the future's in our hands. What are we going to do? Humanity, what are we going to do? Are we going to protect and save the great diversity that exists today? Or are we going to be the destroyers? What are we going to be known for? And frankly, this is looking at our own demise. When I look at pictures like this, Nat Geo ended up putting it on the cover. I was so grateful that they did that, to give it that kind of platform. And they let me write an essay. If you get a chance, check out the October issue last year. And I basically write a story that it's not just the loss of a healthy ecosystem. It's actually the loss for all of us of a wondrous world. The joy and the beautiful possibilities and the wonder of this world is being destroyed. Can you imagine a world without these incredible species? Because I can't. And I just want to tell you the story continues today. What I thought was, a story documenting the end of a species has had this beautiful twist of fate where there's a project called the Biorescue Project where scientists, conservationists, environmentalists, the government, the Kenyan government are all coming together. It's this international consortium. The Berlin Zoo, um, Avantea is a lab in Italy, and Old Pecheta Conservancy. They're all working to now bring the rhino, this northern white rhino, back from extinction. They're harvesting the eggs of the last females. They've already created 3 healthy embryos, and their plan is to use IVF and have a southern white rhino host the embryos and bring the species back from extinction. And, everything is possible. The southern white rhino also went through a bottleneck with very little biodiversity. And now there's over 20,000 southern white rhinos. And now I want to just tell you a couple more hopeful stories, because here's what I want to do in my work is focus on what we can do. I believe that we all have a role, and that a group of individuals has the power to change their destiny. And that same thing is happening. Here's another story in northern Kenya. This is in Namanyak Wildlife Conservancy. And 30 years ago, this place was devastated. You could not find much wildlife roaming here. Elephants, rhinos, everything had been poached, and the living ones fled because they know when it's safe for them, and they left. And elephants are nature's greatest engineers. Without them in this landscape, people were suffering too. And they were scared. The local communities were scared of the poachers. And I want to tell you this beautiful story that has, went from people, the Samburu, that were once afraid of the elephants. And actually, the elephants had been really locally extinct there. They decided enough is enough. And they said, we are going to protect this landscape. We're going to allow the wildlife to come back. And we are also going to create the first indigenous owned and run elephant sanctuary in all of Africa. It is such a beautiful story. I've been covering the story since it began in August of 2016. And this is one of the first babies that fell into a well. They went to go and rescue it. And in the past, people didn't know what to do with the elephants that fell into these wells. They get really deep because of these ongoing droughts, and the mother elephants can't pull the babies out. But now people know exactly who to call. Everybody has a cell phone, they're ubiquitous, and they called Riteti. And this is Joseph, and Joseph was with a team. They went out, rescued this baby. They waited by the well for like 30 something hours, hoping that the mother could come back. And that happens very often. They're able to reunite the baby with their own herd right away, but sometimes they can't. But at least now there's a place for these orphaned elephants, and their goal is to rehabilitate them, return them to the wild, and hopefully one day reunite them with their own herds. This is Mary. Mary is one of the first female elephant keepers, and that's the other piece of the story I love to tell, because it is one of the first sanctuaries that hires indigenous females to be elephant keepers. And it has just transformed not only the way people see wildlife, but how they see each other. And so this story may look like a story about adorable baby elephants, but it's not. It's actually a story of hope, a story of our future, how we see our landscapes, and how we treat each other. And so I'm going to just end with that. This is Dorothy, and she is also one of the first female elephant keepers. But this place has rescued, I have to check in and find out how many elephants they've rescued to date. And it is such a successful story. When things return to us being allowed to travel, you can go and visit this place. And you can stay at a place called Sarara Camp, or there's so many, I guess tourism is an important piece of conservation in so many places. And tourism does matter, but do your work. Find the places where your tourism dollars are going back into the communities. And then I'm going to wrap up and tell you another really wonderful success story. I did a whole book on, it's called Panda Love, The Secret Life of Pandas. And this story began for me in 2013 when I was there to document. This is actually a little panda who is, her name is translated into Hope, and she was born in captivity and is being released back into the wild. And I went there and I wanted to be sensitive to Hope, so I dressed up in a ghillie suit as a tree. And the head of the panda program saw me, gave me a hug, and he said, "You are going to get to hold 2 baby pandas." President Obama, he only held 1. So not only did I get 2 baby pandas, I got the whole bumper crop laid out on a blanket. I knew that I had my in, that I could really dive in deeply to the story. And I went on this journey of reading and researching and learning everything I could about pandas. And this is Papa Panda. This is actually Zhang Hemin, but he's affectionately called Papa Panda. And it was this incredible story that really blew my mind, because I think we've turned pandas into almost like these cartoonish characters. We see them in films, and they're stuffed animals. But what I started to discover was so fascinating. They are elusive. They do not like to, they're very solitary creatures. They basically want to hide out in these thick bamboo forests away from humanity. I found more similarities with them and rhinos. They even have the same kind of squeaky sound that a rhino has, and they just want to be left alone. They only come together once in a year, and they do that in a period of 24 to 72 hours, and that is to mate. And China's kind of been breeding them in captivity. They decided that if they went extinct in the wild, that they wanted enough genetic diversities in captivity so that they could keep the species alive. And this is Ming Ming with her baby, and then this is a baby being weighed. But I love this story because, we're so used to only seeing bad environmental stories coming out of China, and they have actually, it's a huge success story. They're releasing pandas into the wild. They're creating more habitat for them. And here's the best part of the story. The ones that get released into the wild have to be after 1 generation in captivity. They don't actually know how to be wild anymore. So they have to go through this very elaborate process to ensure that they would be able to survive in the wild, which meant that all the scientists and even photographers like me had to dress up in these panda costumes, which were scented with panda urine and feces, because they go by scent, not sight. And they had to pass all these tests, like, do they run away from a leopard? This was a stuffed leopard. And if they run away and run to the top of a tree top, it's a success story. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up this panda story. You can read more. I did a story for National Geographic about it. But just to say that, the biggest piece of this puzzle is habitat. We must ferociously protect the last habitats all over this planet, and connect the existing corridors, reforest areas. The future is really in our hands. What we decide is up to us. Nature is incredibly resilient, but I believe, this is back in Kenya. I believe that it starts with having empathy and believing that there is room enough for all of us. We must treat one another and wildlife with empathy, and learn how to find solutions. And that is so much about habitat and falling in love with the planet, and making this a priority. All of us absolutely have voices. Sorry, my And I'm going to, sorry, can you hear me okay with the phone in the background? Okay. And this is back at Old Pejeta, and we're going to be doing some direct Instagram lives with Joe later in early June, and talk to the keepers because they are the heroes. And I just want to say that the messenger matters as much as the message itself. And to leave you all with that idea, like go out and be a messenger, because all of us have a role. And that's really how I wanted to wrap this up. You can get in touch with me. I've got lots of stories, and happy to answer your questions. But yeah, did you want to wrap up and ask me a few questions, Joe?
I would like that of all things, Amy. If you want to stop the screen share and come back to us,
Okay.
so we get you nice and full screen. And then, we're going to steal some question time from you for sure.
Okay.
A few things that kind of came to my mind watching your presentation. One is, we've done a few of these events together over the last few years, and I never get tired of seeing you in a panda suit. So that's fun. That's always neat to see. And, you shared that picture of the elephant at the beginning, and, apologize for it being graphic, but you know what, these are the kind of images that we need to see. I don't think, I think you'd agree. We don't want to kind of cover that up. We want it to be seen, and seeing those kind of images is sometimes what it takes to get people's attention.
People. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I loved what you said about heroes, about they're the heroes, the people working on the ground in those countries, in their communities, working to protect biodiversity. They understand how important it is to them, and, dedicate their lives to it in such amazing ways. So I love that you share those heroes, those stories. I think there should be more posters on people's walls of conservationists and scientists, and they should be the ones with 50 million followers on Instagram or whatever, because their stories need to be heard.
100%. You're absolutely right. That is the big takeaway. And I think as storytellers, it's up to us to amplify those beautiful, strong voices.
Yeah. So, Amy, what, we've talked about the Old Pejeta a couple of times. What brought you to Old Pejeta in the first place? How did that come together?
Well, that happened exactly 10 years ago. I heard about a story that they were going to move those rhinos from the zoo back to Africa in this last-ditch effort to save the whole species. And I knew that this was the most important story of my lifetime. I mean, it was funny. I pitched that story to everybody in the beginning and nobody wanted it. They didn't think it was visual enough. And I was like, I'm going to go cover it because this is important. We are witnessing, as you know, I'm sure it's been said a lot in this biodiversity festival, but this is the 6th great extinction. And what is different is that it's purely human driven. This is up to all of us.
Yeah. And what do you think it is, Amy? Because people love to get in nature. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody really saying that they're out in the forest and it doesn't just feel good, or sitting by the lake and it doesn't just feel good. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of people know as much about the issues and what's happening maybe outside of their countries around the world. Why do you think that is?
Or even in their backyard, by the way, which, can I just jump in there and say, you don't have to travel all the way. I mean, I got into this because of these stories, but the truth is all of us can get engaged right in our own backyards. We are all facing the exact same issues that are happening across the planet. And I think the key, I feel like sometimes we all get overwhelmed and we feel like the problem's too big for any of us to handle. Somebody else might take care of it. But that's why I share these stories about communities and a group of individuals with no political power, no money, making great, powerful changes in their own future, in their own destiny. And so if they can do it, they should be inspiring to all of us. We should all be getting engaged right here. Find a project in your backyard. Literally, there's something there. You just do a little bit of digging and start there.
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. And that's a really good point that you brought up, a little segue into backyard bio. So all the last 3 days, we've been encouraging people to get outside into their backyard, into their front yard. If they can walk around their neighborhood a little bit, take some photos of what they see, plants, lichens, reptiles, insects, whatever you see.
Yes.
Take pictures, post them on Insta for us. hashtag backyard bio. We want to see those pictures and get a picture of what everyone's seeing in their backyards around the
Yes.
world.
Totally. Fall in love. I really believe that's the other thing. The first step is falling in love. And I know, I mean, I'm not Pollyanna here. I know love is not going to save us, but taking that first baby step becomes this catalyst for a whole crazy chain reaction of incredibly powerful things that can happen. So, get dirty, get uncomfortable, put yourself out there. And I also believe the greatest transformations come from these places of a little bit of discomfort. Go out, get dirty, dive in, and you will be so profoundly excited by how much we can change. Nature is so resilient. I live here in Montana, right in my backyard. This place was devastated just a few decades ago because we dammed it up. We did a whole bunch of, mining. This landscape was polluted. And you go there today and you realize, like, gosh, that was purely human driven in the beginning, and it's been human driven to save it, and it is a success story, and there's so many success stories. So I will say I believe it starts with focusing on the hopeful, because I get overwhelmed by the depressing myself. I don't choose to focus all of my work on the horrors because I don't think that motivates people for great changes. I don't want to cover it up. I talk about the challenges, but I believe we've got to believe that there's a different future.
Absolutely, Amy. Couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely incredible. I love your work. I love the work you're doing. I can't wait to see, where it takes you next when we are allowed to go somewhere next. But you're right. You can get out into your backyard. You can find amazing things. You can capture biodiversity all around you. And it's so important to know what's all around you. So just a huge thank you, Amy. Thank you for joining us on the final day on day 3 of the Global Biodiversity Festival. A couple more events to wrap up the day, but great to have you joining us. And thank you.
Well, I feel the same way. I just want to say my immense gratitude. You are one of those unsung heroes for bringing this to so many people that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. So thank you very much, and see you around soon.
Okay. Thank you, Amy.
Bye.